Hey guys, welcome back. I am so excited for this video, you guys have no idea. So, Point of Light released the other day, and to say that it contains absolute bombshells for Halo Infinite may just be the understatement of the century, and today we're going to cover all of these bombshells in detail.
On that alluringly Teutonic bombshell.
Now, in an effort to just remain as transparent as possible with you guys, I do want to let you know that I haven't actually finished reading this book properly yet. To allow me to make this video, I basically just skim-read to the end to find all the juiciest details to share with you, so bear in mind that the odd detail might be lacking a bit of context. And also, I was asked to wait a few days after release of the book to publish this video, which is why you're seeing it now and not on Tuesday when the book actually released. So it goes without saying, but this video contains major spoilers for Point of Light, so if you don't want the book spoiled, then don't watch. Also, Halo Canon released a great primer video recently for those who aren't up to date on Ryan Forge's stories, but also want to read Point of Light, so if you're in that boat, check out his video. The link is in the description. Right, let's begin. The biggest bombshell revealed in this entire book that links to Halo Infinite is that, contrary to previous lore, we may now have hard confirmation that the Flood are still on Zeta Halo. So, after the Forerunners fired the Halos, there was said to be a large number of Flood, including 10 proto-grave mines, still active on Zeta Halo that remained under watch by a number of monitors on the ring. However, in 2014, the mysterious Forerunner AI catalog that was active on the Waypoint forums said that as of 2558, a joint human and elite strike force had imposed adequate containment and sterilization protocols within infected zones on the Halo. This, combined with the fact that members of the Zeta Halo project who spent much time on the ring in 2555 never encountered the Flood, kind of led us to believe that there were no longer any Flood threats on Zeta Halo. However, it turns out that is not the case. Much of Point of Light is set on Zeta Halo, with Ryan, Spark, and the crew of the Ace of Spades exploring the Halo, notably its substructures, and during this exploration, Spark reveals that he does not believe that the Flood specimens that might still exist in substructure research facilities pose any threat. And it gets even crazier when you learn that these substructures are still severely damaged from the events of the Forerunner-Flood War, and as of 2558, which is when the book is set, are entirely without power and have even possibly been abandoned by the ring's automated maintenance systems. Now, I think it goes without saying that this leaves the door open for a Flood containment breach almost too perfectly. It is worth noting that the power in these powerless substructures can still be turned back on, but still, this to me just seems like an all too perfect setup. Okay, so I just mentioned that those proto-grave mines were once watched over by a number of monitors on Zeta Halo, which links to the next big detail, Zeta Halo's mysterious monitor. For years, we've known next to nothing about this monitor. The only info we had on it was its number designation, Monitor 117649, and that Guilty Spark had tried to contact it during his tenure as Installation 04's monitor, to which he received no reply, and then also, at some point, he filed a number of minor reports about it. It never showed itself when Oni began the Zeta Halo project in 2555 and had never been seen. Well, it turns out this monitor's full designation is 117649 Despondent Pyre, and Spark goes on to ponder whether its intended directive was different to he and the other monitors, given that its Halo, Zeta Halo, had been sent to its firing location by the Isodidact with the intent that it should be a tomb for those who died throughout its horrific past, and that it should remain in the mists of time, lost and forgotten. Well, it seems that this might be the case. Despondent Pyre is never encountered in the book. Instead, two of his executor constructs are, which basically act as his subordinate monitors. One of these monitors is found dead, with its shell entirely destroyed and powerless. The other, Sub-Monitor Adjutant Viridity, is found alive and is noted to have a shell much like Spark once had, but more subdued and time-worn, likely reflecting the age of the Halo. Viridity also notes that Despondent Pyre is everywhere and nowhere. How esoteric. Right, so one of the most important locations on any Halo ring that we always end up visiting in the games is the Cartographer. Now, originally, Zeta Halo's Cartographer was this massive structure that extruded from the edge of the Halo and could be seen from orbit. However, that structure is now destroyed, which kind of explains why we never saw it on the ring in any of the Infinite trailers or anything. The new Cartographer is located underground, within a cluster of ominous black towers, constructed within a gargantuan black fractal crystal. There's also a silent Cartographer, said to be half a ring away, closer to the surface. Very, very interesting. Now, there's something quite mysterious about this underground Cartographer. When Spark accesses it, there appears to be a gap in the timeline of the Halo. One singular event from the Halo's 100,000 plus year history that has been erased. Such a thing would be impossible to do by accident and would have to be done by somebody with a certain level of knowledge and also clearance. What could require such a drastic measure? What could be so important, dangerous, or secret that the Forerunners needed to erase it from Zeta Halo's history? Sadly, the book never answers this question, but my god, if that isn't the perfect plot thread for Halo Infinite, I don't know what is. Anyways, back to that massive black crystal. The center of the crystal is hollowed out, and contained within is a massive underground city. However, the crystal itself is the important bit here, because this crystal once served as the heart of Mendicant Bias. However, Mendicant's core is no longer on Zeta Halo. I mean, that was always quite obvious, but now we have like hard confirmation. Following his final capture by the Isodidact after the Forerunners regained control of Zeta Halo from Mendicant and the Primordial, the rogue AI stood trial and was eventually buried, presumably on the Ark. However, the monitors ensured the crystal it was stored in didn't go to waste. Mendicant's old core now serves many new purposes on Zeta Halo, including acting as its replacement cartographer, and also an archive which the monitors refer to as the Monument, where the essences and imprints of the billions who died during the Forerunner-Flood War are stored. Billions of lives taken from data, logs, imprints, fragments, events research, experiments and more, all collected, catalogued and archived within this crystal, which has been maintained over 100 millennia, as per the orders of the Isodidact and the Librarian. Mendicant's core is now essentially a memorial to the Forerunner-Flood War, and given that it also functions as the primary cartographer for Zeta Halo, what's the over-under on us actually seeing this thing in Infinite? I have a pretty strong feeling we're gonna. However, there's something else that Mendicant's core was also used for, but it requires a bit of explanation. So, when the Ace of Spades first arrives at Zeta Halo, it gets taken down by a swarm of these weird, like, insect things that attach themselves to the ship, combine their kinetic energy, and convert it into electricity to basically EMP it. Now, these things are called the Tullioc, one of the many species that live on Zeta Halo. Way back when the Isodidact sent Zeta Halo to a mysterious part of the galaxy to never be found again, he coated it in a thick shroud of mist to try and scare off any would-be explorers to try and minimize the risk of the Flood on the Halo escaping. However, the monitors purified the atmosphere and lifted this shroud over time to ensure the survival of native life on the Halo, along with the Tullioc, because they'd been feeding on that crystal and in doing so had basically absorbed the data of those who died and was stored within it. It is worth noting though that the Tullioc aren't native to Zeta Halo, and I think, if I read this section right, now inhabit the city that is built within the crystal. And speaking of cities, there are apparently still remnants of a number of lost cities and settlements on Zeta Halo, the echoes of generation after generation of humans living and evolving and forming complex civilizations on the ring. The book even goes as far as having the crew of the Ace stumble upon the ruins of a once great human city, ancient even before Spark's time on the ring when he was still a human. This makes me so optimistic that we might end up finding these ruins in Infinite. It'd be so cool if the ancient human and ancient Forerunner ruins kind of resembled those stone ruins that we only ever found on Delta Halo. Those things and that kind of whole architectural style in general was absolutely beautiful and provided a great contrast to the standard Forerunner architecture, and just randomly stumbling across something like that, besides a stream or at the base of a mountain or in the heart of a thick pine forest, it'd be such a cool experience. Oh, and real quick, on the topic of humans, apparently as of 2558, the Zeta Halo project was still ongoing and had a total of 3,416 humans still deployed to the surface of Zeta Halo, 406 of which were scientists and the rest were military personnel. Do bear in mind though that this is before any of the created stuff and also before the Banished arrived on Zeta Halo, so whether these humans are going to be on the ring in Infinite is kind of up in the air. Right, if we could just venture back into Zeta Halo's underworld for a minute, there are said to be Sentinels that come in a variety of sizes and functions operating in the underworld of the Halo. Hardly a surprise, but this combined with the kind of general description of Zeta Halo's underworld, its size, its scale, and its aesthetic, really remind me of the ring experience from Outpost Discovery. Now, we never got any confirmation either way about this, but many of us theorize that this ring experience was set on Zeta Halo, and if it is, then all of these Sentinels that we see in these very similar looking internal tunnels of the Halo could theoretically appear in Halo Infinite. No confirmation, just some food for thought. And one final interesting detail is that unlike all the other Halos, Zeta Halo does not orbit a gas giant. Now, this was already quite apparent from Halo 5's legendary ending, and honestly, it adds even more credence to the theory that the Halo in the ring experience is indeed Zeta Halo. So apparently the reason that Halos are typically anchored to gas giants as opposed to solid planets is to avoid the possibility of life arising in the shadow of the Halo, either via natural means or via settlers, given the kind of dangerous implications of a foreign species investigating a Halo. We all know how that tends to go. Okay, so to round out this video, we have some details that are once again absolutely massive, but I left them to the end because they don't really connect to Halo Infinite. So, do you remember that mysterious Forerunner intel on Genesis in Halo 5, the one that had that weird Forerunner dude looking for something called Bastion? Well, that thing has stumped the community for years, but no longer. In the latter half of the book, Spark and the Ace of Spades literally go to Bastion. It turns out, Bastion is a template of Earth that also acts as a shield world, and a very important one at that. It has monitors that are all purposefully compartmentalized to avoid a repeat of the whole Mendicant Bias primordial logic plague incident that ended up giving the Flood total control of Zeta Halo. You'll see why this is so important in a minute. The Forerunner dude in the Halo 5 intel was a composed Forerunner by the name of Keeper of Tools, who also acted as one of Bastion's temporary monitors. The reason he was on Genesis was towards the end of the Forerunner-Flood War, he and the other monitors composed themselves to avoid Flood infection. However, when the array was fired, he became trapped in the domain on Genesis and didn't reawaken until 2558 when Cortana accessed the domain gateway on the planet. He was essentially unconscious for 100,000 years. Now, just to sidetrack for a second, this seems like a bit of a canon inconsistency because in Promises to Keep, the story that's set after the firing of the array, the domain is turned back on. That's already caused some kind of lore problems in the past, and I see no reason why Keeper of Tools couldn't have just escaped Genesis because the domain was reactivated. Maybe the domain gateway had to be turned on, I don't know. All the semantics about the domain, honestly, have become so muddied in recent years that I think anything kind of goes at this point. Anyways, back to the topic at hand. The reason that he so urgently needed to get back to Bastion was because it needed to be moved to hide it from Cortana and the Guardians. Reason being, Bastion was the home of many of the Librarian's experiments that she kept a secret from the Forerunners, some of which were cataclysmically important. Spark refers to the secrets that Bastion contains as rarer than bottled time, which is certainly one way of putting it. During the Forerunner-Flood War, a select few Forerunners were creating something on Bastion that posed a grave threat to the Flood. They were harboring the remains of precursors and were constructing a ship, Eden, that would eventually launch with these remains on board and reseed the precursors in a different galaxy to begin anew. This was meant to be the Forerunners' way of seeking atonement for the genocide they committed against the precursors that acted as the first major imbalance of living time and ultimately led to the creation of the Flood. Apparently, during this genocide, which is typically referred to as the Forerunner-Precursor War, although calling it a war is a bit disingenuous, 2 precursors hid on a planet and were sheltered by some Forerunners who were against the massacre. However, despite possessing the ability to heal themselves, the precursors decided to let nature take its course and basically withered away. Not all precursors were evil. The Flood were not innate to the precursors as a species, as the Primordial had previously tried to suggest. Just like any species, there were good and there were bad precursors. Just as the Primordial relished in suffering, so did others celebrate joy. Now, as I understood, basically what happens is Guilty Spark becomes the new monitor of Bastion, as per the librarian's wishes, and then helps move the planet through several portals until it's outside of the galaxy, and then launches the Eden to reseed the precursors on one of its planets. Over time, these precursor remains blossom into kind of this exotic flora and fauna, and in a distant future, will eventually become sentient, following the genetic code of the precursors, while being free from their genetic memory, so they will essentially be a new civilization. Precursors, but starting from a clean slate with no memory of their kind of relationship with the Flood. So at some point, the precursors could very well return, but sadly, that won't be for a long time, and when they eventually do return, it's likely that they won't be anything like the precursors that we know of from the Forerunner kind of era of the universe. The librarian also says that in time, there will be another Primordial, another Didact, another Chakass, and another Ryan Forge, but before anyone freaks out, she doesn't mean this literally, she just means this in a kind of metaphorical sense. There's not really much to get from this. And that, my friends, is every juicy detail in Halo Point of Light. If you ask me, the true prelude to Halo Infinite. Every detail shared about Zeta Halo in this book just makes me even more excited for Infinite's campaign. I mean, the possibility of us getting to explore Zeta Halo's underbelly and run into a Flood containment facility with the power out just sounds too perfect. Man, I cannot wait to explore Zeta Halo. This campaign, I'm trying not to get too excited for it, but dude, it's getting really hard. I'm so excited for this game's campaign. By the way, don't forget to check out the Audible link that I plugged in my last video if you want to listen to Point of Light. I mean, there's a reason that I do so many Audible sponsors. Halo and Audible really do go together like peanut butter and jelly. And so, with that said, that's going to do it for today. I want to give a massive thank you to F. Diker for becoming a new Primordial. Very, very fitting, over on Patreon, as well as all of my other supporters over there. I appreciate you guys so much, and thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll catch you all in the next one.